Hey up and welcome to the Temple of Blair. For those of you who have subbed to the YouTube channel in the last few weeks, on the straight off the heels of those filmed interviews, this is a more laid back research vehicle for the History of Roadrunner record documentary that I'm producing. So bear with us. It's a long conversation, but it's nice and detailed about some of the nuances of the music industry if that's the kind of shit you're into. But yeah, just check out previous videos and you can see the kind of shit that I do. Anywho, this is a conversation with a Mr. Austin Stevens. Austin worked in the sales arm of Roadrunner Records in the 21st century, and he's seen both sides of the Warner acquisition in 2012, or the completion of said acquisition in 2012. So this one's super interesting. It's one of those where my neck now hurts because I keep throwing my head back and laughing. But yeah, you'll enjoy this one. 1, 2, fuck shit up. Sometimes need to constantly reframe why I'm doing this whole fucking thing. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
because every day I learn more and more why Roadrunner is a big deal. But to the people that were there, people who literally experienced it and have a reverence for it that I'll never understand, I have to ask the question: why is it a big deal, and why is it important to you? Why is it important that we document these things and not allow Monty to retire until he completes his knowledge transfer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think for a lot of people, like at least maybe like industry wise, it was the indie label that makes good, right? Like the little guy that became that played with the big boys, but also, I mean, I feel like I'm at the later end of this. Like you've had so many people on, like you've seen what people went on to, right? And like just the talent that got turned out of the staff from that label, right? Like beyond just like the musicians and the artists that came out of it. Just what everybody went on to. It seems like anybody that was there. I mean, some people went in completely different paths for sure, but there's so many people that kind of went on to do their own thing, or ended up at other places and have been incredibly successful. And I think that kind of really speaks to just like the way they curated talent there, and also threw you to the wolves to to learn, and you got some really great chops. And it was, I do come from the later era of it, like the last 10 years of the label, or 12 years of the label, and there was something to how to articulate it.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, you got the best of both worlds because you felt like you were working at an indie, but we were also there, like, when the mergers happened and when we were playing with the majors and whatnot, and like what we learned from that experience, what we learned from working with those teams, and took into it, but kind of never really losing the respect of like our indie peers and whatnot. And I think that was really important to a lot of folks there. And it was a really strange rope to walk, right? Because on some level you have the folks like on the indie side and they could easily write you off. And then you're also trying to get the attention of your new partners, like, on the major side. And, there's something to be said for the hands-off approach and that they let us do our own things, but also, we wanted to be taking advantage of the machine that is as well, or in the influence that those partners could divvy out, but also keeping our indie cred. And it is a fine line to walk. So
it's also, I think, it's so innovative in the cultural impact. And the example I always say is 9 nut jobs in jumpsuits knocked X off the top of the charts that week. I can't remember who it is. Kathy actually emailed me and said, "Oh, it was this guy that was knocked off the charts." But I think
I mean, we could save that story for later because that's or we could do it now. But it was The Game was the artist we knocked off. But yeah, I can give you that. That's a long. I mean, it's not a long story, but it's a lot of detail to that story. That would definitely come in.
We'll get to it quite early because it'll be at the start of your tenure. But I think my point is, it's having such extreme and outlier personnel and metalheads and people who are traditionally disenfranchised, and it's almost cliche to say, but people who are traditionally disenfranchised being empowered in such a fashion, it's so striking and so reverent that I think we're now, where we describe it, we're at a point where vocabulary fails us because it never happened again. Does that make sense? It was just like it was so poignant, and the fire was so hot, and it's just not happened since. So it's no one's referred back to it enough to then try and figure out exactly what happened and therefore where it could have gone and how it could have continued, I think.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think maybe the closest to that is, you know, your Sub Pop or your Epitaph, right? On and them having like some level of that success too. I mean, you can't like discount like the Offspring and things like, and major records like that came through those as well. But you also had a lot of those artists like, you know, they jumped ship pretty quickly and went straight to majors. So, you know, I think there's probably something to, and again, you know,
remember
equate this.
Offspring in late 90s, like pop punk, that got sexy. It got American Pie films. It penetrated mainstream culture in a way that Slipknot never did. Slipknot were always ugly fuckers. And so were all the bands that followed them. And they still had a seat at the table.
Absolutely. But, you know, and there's been a sentiment that I've noticed on this about like Slipknot would have been Slipknot no matter what. And 70% of me completely agrees with that statement, but there is 30% of me that is like, you know, I think what Roadrunner was able to do for them was, and it was definitely, I think, a goal of the band, certainly something I heard tangentially, like through Monty and other folks, was they wanted to, like, Clown loves the idea of something that heavy and dark permeating into pop culture and finding a bigger and bigger and bigger audience, right? So, you know, I think what we were able to do was amplify that on some level and get creative alongside them, and really expand that out more. And I mean, they also did it themselves too, just in like their musical journey and how they grew. Because, you know, those first 3 records are really kind of very, I mean, really every record's very different from the next, I would actually say, for them. But those first 3 are like largely like sonically different, just the songwriting, the actual sound and everything. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And it's good to get another tributary off that stream of Slipknot and would have been Slipknot. Where does Roadrunner come in? Because because why the fuck should we care about a label? Because when the artist is the one that is the thing that makes these things happen, and there is an answer to that question, and that's what this whole thing is about. So tell me how you got your foot in the door of the label. How did this nightmarish career path commence?
Nightmarish and dream come true all at the same time. So there you go. Good thing I'm a horror movie fan. No, I was an intern. That said, I lived in Atlanta. There were regionals at the time, right? One of my best friends in Atlanta was working part-time for the Southeastern Regional in Atlanta out of the Red offices. He was like, you know, I don't get paid anything doing this. I got to get a real job. Aren't you going to school for this? Don't you should take over for me. I'll just tell my boss. Like, it was kind of like that, right? And so also speaks to the indie, like, you know, the way the indies work, right? Like, you know, you know somebody and all that. And I was going to school for it. So, you know, at some point I was going to need to do an internship anyway. So I was like, oh, cool. Yeah. And I get paid. Sweet. So he like set me up with his boss, she was actually working down in Florida at the time. And she was great. Her name is Stacy Tompkin. And there was like a radio regional there as well, who was like seldom ever in that office. So
what year early?
So I would have started in October of 2000.
October 2000. Okay.
Yeah, as the intern. So I want to say the Universal. So I was there. I was the intern for about a year and a half, and in that time period is when the Universal merger happened. So we all moved out of the Red office and then went over to the Universal office.
Let's take a step back just for the minute. So what's the structure here? You said there's a Southeast Regional. So I need to do my homework more on the office locations, because I know I know New York moves about 5 times in its tenure. There's an LA office. There's a bunch of international offices, but I don't know what else is going on in the US. So
in the US, there was 4 offices. There was the New York office.
Mm-hmm.
There was the LA office.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Chicago office that I believe was also based probably at Red. Like whoever our distributor was at the time, we would have office space with them. And then there was an Atlanta office, and so I was there in the Red office.
What was the capability of those 2 regional offices? I'm calling them the 2 non-flagship site offices. Was it the same as the other ones? There was an A&R, there was a sales, there was...
No, it was way leaner. So New York was New York. In LA, I think you got a good gist of that from Kathy. But there's obviously more staff there. You have more like probably your sync people and stuff like that over in LA because of the film business and whatnot there and the gaming business there. So Chicago and Atlanta were very small. It was like the sales regional and the promo person. And at least in Atlanta, Chicago, I would probably assume it was Scott Stiglich in Chicago. Chicago. He was based there, and I believe Laura Bender might have been the promo person at the time, working with him.
These also are responsible for the perpetuated presence of the label in these territories.
Well, and I'll tell you why. So, and it's actually funny that Stiglich was in Chicago. It's because he lived there, but he was taking regular trips to Minneapolis. Most regional offices would have been in Minneapolis because that's where Best Buy and Target headquarters are. So you're selling to Best Buy and Target. Atlanta, you're selling to you're selling to everybody in like kind of that Southeast. So we had a host of indies. AEC was down there, Alliance, which is still down. It's not in Atlanta, but it was in Miami. Mm-hmm. So it was like kind of Atlanta was a nice central location because it was like a music hub. And it touched like a few different accounts. And there was like a lot of like regional chains as well, like Music City, Hastings, things like that that you would touch as well.
Right. That makes sense. Oh, I love this shit.
and actually at some point I took on Circuit City, which was like in Virginia. So it was just, it was a central location because there was a lot of chains in that. So that's why Atlanta was there, was kind of central to all of that. Minneapolis would have been the home for the other stuff. And then obviously the hubs with New York being the main office in the US and in LA.
So your role is presumably to check numbers with Red at this time.
As an intern, I was doing a lot of the stock checks. I was calling stores when bands were on the road, like all over the region, making sure they had stock, making sure they had what they needed. Like if they were coming through town, sending them posters, like sending them everything just to hang stuff up in the store. If they didn't have anything, letting them know they're coming to town and, order one, all that good stuff. And then, any other projects that they would kind of give me along the way.
Right. Okay. That's interesting now. Just being like the lone vanguard of Roadrunner in the, in that particular region.
I was totally a punk guy. So like, me coming into it, I was like the guy I took over from, he was a metal guy first and foremost, and like definitely dove it, but also was way into like punk and all that stuff too. I was definitely early days like punk guy, like my brother got me into Metallica and Guns N' Roses and all that, and then I kind of found Pantera on my own and White Zombie and all of that, and then one day you're 15, you meet a girl and she's into punk rock, and you abandon it all and you're like, okay. So when I started like there, I was kind of like, I grew up watching Headbangers Ball and all that. So like I knew these bands, but I didn't necessarily have that same association of like the brand, the label that they were on. But like, I'm like looking through, I'm a nerd though, right? Like, so as soon as I walk in the door and I'm like, free CDs, you're like, it's like, I need to figure out everything that's going on with this label if I'm going to work here. And, so you're putting on everything. And I was like, I like Sepultura. I remember them. Typo Negative. I didn't realize they were label mates. And, Biohazard. And like, which was probably one of my bigger ones, like back in those days. So, and then, learning, and then the New Guard, right? With like Slipknot, like I knew Slipknot because you couldn't really get away from them on that first record. But like, sure. I did not know a song until I started as an intern. And then I listened to it, and you're just kind of like, oh shit, well, no wonder this is so big, right? And diving in, and yeah, so just going through like all of that stuff and just kind of learning everything, and even the history, like going through, like, I kind of missed Fear Factory, so getting to like re-educate myself on that. Machine Head, I kind of missed those first few records, so re-educating myself on that and all that. So I definitely went down like an extreme wormhole and became like a tried and true metal fan very quickly again.
Try doing that. Try doing the exact same thing 20 years later, mate.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. So you're going, you're there, you're enjoying it, and then the Universal thing happens. Was it all steady sailing up until that point?
It was, and like it's the thing. I was going to school for this. I was going for like a music industry degree, and the one thing they would always tell you is like, it's all like more so it's like, we can teach you shit, but like it all comes down to just it comes down to like the relationships you build. So I really took that to heart. So like, yeah, I mean, I was in there, like, I made friends with everybody in that office. I'm still friends with everybody in that office. At least one of them works with me, or worked at Warner as well. And has since retired, but we still occasionally hit each other over Facebook and all that good stuff. And stayed really close with that crew for a long time. And then going over, it was just like, all of a sudden you like have to do that all over again. But everyone was like so nice. Like, I mean, the music industry is really small. So it's like, it certainly does not pay off to be unkind in the industry. Like, so you run across more like really nice people and stuff than the industry might lead you to believe.
Sure. So when Universal bought the label and they upped that Atlanta office, was that a strategy to just centralize everything, or were they thinking, oh no, we're Universal, we've already got resources in all these places?
No, and I think it was kind of said in there, right? That Leor had kind of said it was hands off, right? Let them do their thing. They know what they're doing. So at least from our level, like, they wanted us in there. They wanted their own people in there, so we were in there. And we worked with the IDJ team. So like, they had like, there was like always like it's like every 2 weeks there was like a new release meeting, and you would go through and you would kind of sit with all of the sales leads at the distributor and all of that. And I would sit in on the IDJ one when that time came, right? And we would do all of that, right? Like, so I should probably back up. So the Stacy, who was my boss at the time, she left about maybe 6 months into the Universal merger to take a job as a regional in Atlanta for Warner Brothers Records. And so I was just kind of like, and she had told me, hey, I'm taking this job. Roadrunners also decided not to pay interns anymore, so I have to let you go. And I was like, well, wait, hold on. You're not paying me that much. Like, can I just stay? And like, I'm getting internship credit for this. Like, I got another job. Like, I need this for school credit. Like, can I just stay on and do what I'm doing and just work with somebody else? Like, she's like, oh, let me check. And like, so she called her boss, who ended up being my boss, Michael Cantor, who was like the head of sales for almost my entire time there. And Mark Shapiro, who was also our director of field marketing. And he was also he came up through like internships and all that stuff in the industry. So I think he had a soft spot for me. And Michael, I think, was a little taken aback by the fact that I was willing to work for free. And he was like, could this guy do your job? And her response was, it's not brain surgery, and he's great. So, I think they did interview some people, but it was really weird. I was still in school. I was almost done, but not quite finished. And they legit like flew me to New York to interview. And like, and and this was like maybe a month or two after she had left. Okay. So it was like a little bit of a courting period, because they did talk to some other people and all of that. And I think they knew they could get me really cheap because I was fresh out of school. Yep. They knew I had a good head on my shoulders, and I knew I knew the culture, and I knew like the company, because I at that point had been there, about getting close to 2 years.
Sure.
And yeah, I think they just really liked the fact that, like, you paid your dues a little bit. I cheated a little bit because, like, I went up, I flew in. I mean, I legitimately was there for probably 8 hours, like, in New York. I flew into New York and they got me out of there. And I went in. Cantor, I think, had already made up his mind, like, that I was this guy, and Mark had been there, like, to just be like.
Were those the two interviewers always Doug?
So they were like my bosses, basically, because I was already kind of doing the gig on some level for them. And I started to meet with Jonas. And I go into Jonas's office, and, like, he does the interview and all that. And, like, I mean, this shows you how green I was, but he was like, the only question I even remember is, like, he's like, do you consider yourself a tenacious person? And I was like, you mean like crazy? Yeah. And he was like, do you know what tenacious means? And I was like, I do not.
When did that Tenacious D record come out?
It wasn't out yet. It wasn't out yet. But I think he just thought that was funny. But I did cheat a little bit because I was, like, waiting to go to the airport. I was, like, legitimately standing outside of the building, and I saw him and Cantor walk out, and they just hired a new radio regional down there too, who was also a young guy. Right. And I heard Jonas say to him, I was like, looks like Atlanta will be run by a bunch of rookies. And I was like, oh, sweet, I got the job. I didn't find out until, like, a few days later, but
that's awesome.
But yeah, so it was good. But to go back to what you're saying, like, so we were pretty ingrained with the team, but they were always really respectful. Like, I would even say I had a bit of a mentor down in Atlanta with the IDJ rep, this guy, Rod Gunther, who was fantastic. He really was hands off, but he was always very much like, if you got questions, if you need anything, let me know. Right. But he always like, let me do my thing. And they were always, like, super respectful that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what informed the decision to be so hands off. I mean, it's obvious. It's fucking obvious because obviously Roadrunner was very much an autonomous machine. Right? But was your strategy, look, guys, this could be a free ride if only we just stay. Let's just not fuck it up. Let's not fuck this relationship up. You know what I
mean? Yeah.
So what's the culture when you start at Roadrunner then? So October 2000, Slipknot's landed, The State by Nickelback's being pushed. We've got, as I keep saying, flagship acts doing flagship things. We still have Machine, we still have Fear Factory. It's about to put out Digimortal. There's a few things going on. What's the vibe? That's a good question. That's a better way to say it.
Well, I mean, the vibe generally was, like, crazy positive, right? Because you did have, so I'll say this. You have the Slipknot record come, but for Iowa, right? And then right on the heels of that, you have the Nickelback record. And everyone was just over the moon. I mean, like, the radio guy there was just, I'd never seen him happy. And he was very happy, like, throughout all of that, right? And then the new guy came in and kind of took it over, right? So it was really interesting just in the sense of, like, there was all this commercial success. So, like, it was really positive, but to, like, speak to the culture, like, as a regional, it's hard to do because you're removed from it. Like, it was two of us in an office, right? And I think maybe Kathy mentioned it too a little bit with LA. Like, if you're not in New York, like, and that's kind of what I learned when I got to New York was, oh, this is very different.
What year do you go to New York? Just so I can plot it in the questions.
2005, I go to New York in the, like, kind of the late winter. Basically, Mark Shapiro, who I mentioned, he was our director of field marketing for a couple years. He had decided to leave to take a job at Ferret as their head of sales. And he was like, you need to come up here and just take this job. Like, you're the person I'm recommending for this. Like, you just need to come do this. So, I mean, he basically went in, if he was telling me the truth, and he never lies. So he told me, he basically was like, I'm leaving. And he was really well liked, within the building by everyone. And I think he was like, but Austin, you just need to bring Austin up, like, and you'll be good.
Everything will be fine.
Yeah. So, and I think I had to, I had to make a few phone calls to my now wife, who is my girlfriend at the time, being like, New York, what do you think? And she's like, take it. So that was easy. And I think I called my best friend, and he was just like, of all the people, like the one guy not looking to get out is getting out of here. Look at that. Because I was definitely like laid back, pretty easygoing. So which is also very frowned on in New York. So you gotta earn your chops that way too.
You do all right in Old York, mate, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So before we skip over this bit,
yeah,
transition from Red to Universal.
Yeah.
This feels more significant than it seems when it's written down, right? When I read it, it's like, oh, this seems trivial. But having spoken to Alan, I know it's a big fucking deal that this is.
It was totally a big deal. And again, you worked very closely with these, like even as an intern, I worked really closely with these folks. So like, well, and it's actually funny, like, we went over there and I was basically just told, hey, you're moving over here. So I wasn't really there to see the reaction. It was just very kind of cut and dry. I ran into folks like over, that next year or whatever, and everybody was super nice. I mean, no one was like had any ill will, but actually that same friend of mine that was the Roadrunner intern before me ended up being an assistant for one of the people at Red, and he was like, cool. Oh yeah, the day you guys left, they took every Roadrunner plaque and turned them upside down and put them in the bathroom. So it was like, and that was the Atlanta office. I mean, I'm not saying all of Red did that, but like, I think they were like a little symbolic. Bit, some people were rubbed on that, and it sucks. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I've learned a lot from this podcast just on the sense of like the history of that deal and why that really truly happened. I'd always heard different stories, but I feel like I'm getting a more accurate portrayal now of things from your podcast actually than even like most of the stories that I had heard and theories on why.
That's the most glowing endorsement of any vocational activity. I'll put on my CV, that mate. That's interesting. That obviously, I'm sure as you say, I'm not sure not everyone put all the plaques in the bathroom, but it's very symbolic.
Yeah.
Very,
but I mean, but at the same time, you it's a small industry and everybody stays friends. So, because you never know when, somebody's going to end up somewhere else and then you end up somewhere else. Right. So,
right. Fantastic. That's fucking brilliant. So what did change then? Did Universal have a different, because my main milestone with distribution, Austin, is sort of like everyone just, like, we've got the 80s, everyone just run ragged trying to make things work. Vans are getting robbed, fucking Abigail King Diamond is fucking spilling out into the street, and then Nielsen happens and everything becomes digitized and trackable, and then the entire metrics of how success is quantified is completely changed. And then I have no other milestone on how we're measuring distribution until we get to Napster, when it all fucks everything up. So was there a difference between how Red and Universal operated?
I mean, for me, it would probably just be volume more so than anything. Like those new release books, like at Universal, were just gargantuan every 2 weeks that you were having the meeting, and what all you're going through, and you felt like you were on a bit of like a cattle call, like in the sense of like making sure your priorities heard and that they have all the information they need, and then of course you're following up after that, right? Sure. And you're pretty hands on with all the account reps, and you're developing that relationship with the accounts themselves too. So, if you need to ask for a favor, you can ask for a favor. Mm-hmm. And that's like probably a big difference now between what it is now versus what it was then, right?
Yeah.
It was all on that physical product and playing with returns and hitting certain numbers for a certain quarter and all that, a lot of things that I don't miss at all.
Were you ever incentivized? Like I always give the Bloody Kisses example for the Red guys. They were brought over to Amsterdam for a party. If Bloody Kisses went gold, which happened, and it happened. Did you ever get anything like that?
Well, again, me coming over, it was like right when we were like a year from everything just blowing up. And so everything blew up. So at that point, we had company retreats. We had we were doing things together. Like my one taste as a regional, like to the company culture was like that first retreat that we had. So, you know, we flew up to New York, and we were like in the Catskills, and I think the joke was like we were staying in the hotel of like Dirty Dancing, which is not accurate, but it like felt like that, right? And it was like everybody was there and everybody was partying and all the international people were in. And I did one of the ones I listened to recently, like the Nickelback email from Case that Hank Hanker like made a plaque of. That was at that thing. Like Lior was there, and Hank like presented this plaque. First time meeting Hank. Hank is a force to be reckoned with. Like as a personality, I wish I was still in touch with him, because he's like just was one of my favorite people like that I tried to keep in touch with from like the international side. But that was really where we got to meet everybody as a regional. Like you know, and I didn't know everybody, and they did those a few. Like I think I was at least at 2 company retreats we did, and then the Roadrunner United party was that as well. So there was technically 3. It's just one stayed local.
Right. Dude, I'm still trying to track down that email. I've been working with a few people to track down those sort of big Case calls to arms emails. Like there's some of them. There's not just one. There's a good number of them, and we've got a good number of them stashed away in the old Temple of Blair hard drives. But the silver side up one is still lacking.
Oh, I mean, I wish I had pictures of a few things, because sometimes Case just walked over to Cantor's office and just wrote a number on the office window in Sharpie of like, this is the number you have to hit. Like, and he would just be on the phone looking at it kind of nervously and smiling and nodding like, yep.
Jesus. So actually tell me about Michael Cantor, because he's a name that's come up a few times in the last. Yeah. I spoke with Carl Severson as well, and he had a reverence for the guy.
Oh yeah, Carl was my roommate at that first retreat, and it was kind of like, and it was very like, I think I just started full time like when I went into that, Cantor was so not Roadrunner, but totally Roadrunner, I think is like the best way to put it. Like he was not a metal guy, and he was very like upfront about that, but he was very good at selling like metal records. But he was thrilled when Nickelback happened, because like he was a pop guy, so like he loved that. But actually, in all honesty, he actually came more from like a hip hop background.
What is
as far
his
as like his passion and stuff like that.
Where does he work? Where does he work prior to Roadrunner?
Prior to he worked in distribution, like locally, I believe. I mean, again, I don't want to speak for him. He could give better history, and we still keep in touch. Like I talk to him. He's one of the people I talk to probably at least once every 3 months, if not more frequently. And he's like, I mean, he's totally gone on to do his own thing. He's like super successful in like real estate, but he was such like but he likes to just know what's going on still and everything. So he loves just kind of like keeping in touch and all that. And, everybody's kind of that way with the old guard. It's always, everybody's always checking in on each other through other people, and all of that. So,
so tell me about Iowa and the game. You seem to, you were gearing up.
So that wasn't Iowa. That was All Hope Is Gone. Is the one that one happened with. Yeah.
All right.
So it was later. It was later. So I would say, for Case, so you go through everything with Case and with the different tent poles, right? But he never stopped, right? He always had a new goal to achieve, right? So I joked around about that number on the window. Like that was I believe that was like, this is how many records you have to ship on Nickelback. Like, and so, yes, Nickelback sold, well, so let's actually go back to Iowa for a minute. So Slipknot was massive, right? With the first record. So he was like, so the next goal was like, okay, well, we have a platinum record. You have to ship platinum on Iowa. And that was the goal, right? And so you have Nickelback Silver Side Up happen, and then he's like, cool, Long Road you have to ship 2 million on, and that was, it was always just like a moving bench post of like more and more, like, so no one rested on anything, right? So I think with the All Hope Is Gone story, why it's fun is like kind of the next achievement after the Long Road, I think, was just getting the #1, which we hadn't had yet. We had not had a #1 record.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So okay. Slipknot had not gotten it yet. Nickelback had not gotten it yet. Nickelback finally got it with All the Right Reasons, and that was our first one. That was the first one.
And that was 10 platinum.
But there was, exactly. But there was, there were the segment of the Roadrunner office that was like the tried and true, like metalheads and our metal brand. And I think everyone was just like, Slipknot deserves this, So All Hope Is Gone comes out, and it was a great record. And then I woke up. So I handled all the sound scan, of course, when I moved to New York. It was brutal. You had to get up at I was in the office at 7 a.m. I had to have everything in everyone's inboxes with a full analysis by 9 a.m. at the latest. Fuck. With all these spreadsheets and all of that. And, top performing DMAs, all of that stuff. With full recap of this happened this week, and this was what happened with the competition, and so the whole thing, right? And I opened it up, I downloaded the chart, and I looked at it, and it was legitimately a difference of 13 units. And I was like, motherfucker. And I had people coming to me all week, Monty coming to me the whole week of release, Jonas coming over, oh, how we look. I'm like, it's going to be really close. It's going to be really close. And so when I got it and the game beat us by 13 units, I was like, there's 2 columns in SoundScan. There is your this week column and your last, at the time. It looks a bit different now. The last week, or no, I'm sorry. It was the this week, and then it was your total. Mm-hmm. Our total was higher than the games. People had broken street date, and Slipknot had sold more records. Mm-hmm. So I was like, that's bullshit. I'm not losing by 13 fucking units because some indies broke street date or whatever happened. So I call at legitimately 7 a.m. in the morning. I call our person at, were we at the Warner? Can't remember if it was in the Warner system at that point. So I called my buddy Chris Walsh over at Warner, and I was like, yo, he's like, I know. I was like, no, we sold more. We had, people broke street date and we have a higher fine. Isn't there some rule about it? He's like, I think there might be.
What's broke street date? What's this?
So basically there were sales the week before the record came out, because it's physical product, right? So you're shipping that. Mm-hmm. Stores get it on, Tuesday or Wednesday, the week earlier, or, Friday. At that time, it was a Tuesday release date, right? So they get it on Friday. They sell them over the weekend, because indies got to make ends meet too, right? Everybody was just buying for their piece of the pie. There was so much competition and stuff at the time. So I was just furious about it. and I asked them, can you look into this? And to his credit, he went to them and he challenged them on it. And they basically they were doing a recount and all, because it was the tightest margin in SoundScan history, at the time, and all of that. And I had Court Brennan calling me, and I'm like, yo, 13 units. I'm like, yo, I'm trying to fix it. I can sit here and talk to you, or let me try to do my thing. He's like, go. Right. And I had Jonas coming over, and Jonas, at this point, it's probably 10 a.m. in the morning. Everybody's had this in their inbox for an hour and a half. Everybody's just kind of Jonas comes over, and he's just he's like, we did a great job. He'd accepted it. And I was like, no, I'm working on this. And he was like, okay. Right. He just walks away. And I think I got a phone call half an hour later that was he's like, so Universal's being called right now to tell them that there was a number of indies that were not counted in the tally, and Slipknot actually is the number one record by about 1,200 units. and you have the number one record. And, meanwhile, and I think it was, I can't even remember. I probably wasn't the first phone call. Like, I'm sure it probably went to Jonas and Case first, right? Sure. But maybe they called me, and I can't remember. I feel like maybe we all got the news at the same time. But yeah, if you talk to Jonas and my name comes up, like, that's the story he tells. Like, he gets very. So I was pretty relentless on that. I was really happy with that, and luckily I had someone like Chris Walsh at Warner, who had that relationship with SoundScan to be able to challenge it and get it done. So, like, again, had we been with an indie, I don't know that we would have had that clout or been able to call that in. So, to their credit, he was really instrumental in that too. But definitely something I take a lot of pride in, and not in the sense of I want to piss on somebody else's release week, but it's pretty awesome, and it was just so well deserved. and what's hilarious is every record since then's been number one for them. So good for them. Like, I love those guys.
So once you got the video saying you're now the number one record, do you like smash your coffee mug and throw your fist? You fucking did it.
In spirit, I certainly did. I think I was so exhausted just from I think the adrenaline crash came down. So I probably wanted to go to sleep an hour after getting that news. But it was a pretty amazing day.
Wow. By 13, that's fucking awesome.
But it ended up being by 1,200, so there you go.
Yeah. There's something which, I don't know if you in a sales capacity could sort of parallel this. One thing Amy was saying was one of the core things that Roadrunner did, the way it interfaced with the wider world, was it always made sure that the underground metal stations on a radio capacity got the heavy shit first. It was always about planting the seeds way outside of what we could regard as like a mainstream or AAA sort of establishment. Was that something you could have done in sales as well? Is that something was that a mentality that was reflected in that arm of the business?
Yes and no. Probably not as much as, say, with the core stuff that Amy was into, whether that be metal radio or whether that be press.
I acknowledge there's much less you can do, but
yeah, on the indie side, you had your stores, right? Yeah. But there's different stores, right? There's the super indie stores that don't really do much with, and I actually find that that's changed significantly. Indie stores now are just the cool places to buy records, and I feel like everybody goes there for different. I think Slipknot could sell there as well as the next cool thing on Sub Pop or Polyvinyl, as much as Lady Gaga could sell there. They've just become a little bit more all encompassing, pop culture purveyors, right? As opposed to being one niche. Whereas I think back then it was still very nichey. So you had your metal stores, and those were obviously tried and true. Best Buy was probably the big box that was really, that's where the metalheads went. More so than anything else. Target could certainly be a player. Walmart on some Walmart was ground zero for Nickelback, for those tried true rock records. They were the massive outlet. But so it was just all different. And Hot Topic obviously was a huge one for metal. And they were always a tried and true one. So you try to pick those partners to do really creative stuff with, or partner with, in creative ways.
Is the retail arm still consignment in these days? So your priority is get Best Buy to buy as many fucking records as possible because it's their risk.
I would be hard pressed to say exactly what it is these days, just because I'm out of it. Because I work on the digital side now completely.
I mean, in early 21st century.
Oh, okay.
That time, not necessarily now.
Oh yeah. So at that point, it was, they had a certain amount of days, right? It's 60 or 90 days, depending. And you'd run deals, discounts and stuff. You might give them an extra 30 days or whatever, and push a bit more out there. So again, whether it was either hitting your quarterly number or strategically, it might just be okay, we're a year into this record, we're still working it, they're going on tour. We got to push some more out there. So, again, just give them those more advantageous terms so that they felt more comfortable stepping out on something.
But it was consignment still.
Yes. At that point.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Up to like my end on the physical side in 2012. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And when it's another culture question. There's a story that Monty told me recently, which was regarding Ghost in 2012. I think Tobias came in for a meeting, and part of the jive was to make the artist feel really at home, especially trying to sell up the idea of Roadrunner more than they could do just by his culture and his legacy. So in this case, a lot of staffers greeted Tobias dressed as ghosts, and it was all like a big fucking hurrah and a right laugh. Did you ever see anything like that during your tenure? Was there ever like
we came in all the time, like when we were courting artists, they would bring us in pretty regularly, like, to meet with, sometimes it was with an artist, sometimes it was with just a management team or manager. But we did those relatively frequently. Now I will say, like, it is very, the New York office is the New York office. Like,
sure.
You feel it when you walk in there. Like when I walked in there, it was, again, deer in headlights. I'd been working for the company for like, 2 or 3 years at that point as the regional. Yeah. But I came in, like, I had to earn my stripes again. Like, it wasn't, I think I got it like about a year later. Mm-hmm. We had put out a baby band, and they've had some radio success. They had a local following, and like, we sold like 4,000 records like first week, which I think nobody anticipated it doing. And because I think Jonas would scratch his head occasionally about me. I was Southern. I was like a Southern boy. I was way too nice and way too laid back. I hadn't gotten my neurotic New York styling yet. So I think they actually realized, he was, pretty, and actually Bob Johnson, I will say, who was also somebody I just thought did not like me at all. Like the first year we worked together in that New York office, I know he gave me a lot of credit for that win. And I think things started to change a bit after that. And then I felt more comfortable in the culture and everything there. It's like, okay, the kid actually knows what he's doing.
Can you name that band?
A Faction. Yeah. Okay. So they were from Dallas, Texas, I believe.
I think Meep Meep did an episode on Faction recently.
What's that?
I think Meep Meep did an episode on Faction.
Oh,
recently.
Maybe. Oh, yeah. Super nice guys. That's the thing too. Like, you always feel for those that didn't necessarily go, because everybody was always nice. It's very rare that you worked, especially the young bands. Yeah. So, but yeah, that was one where it was just. I think it definitely, the fact that they had a big week like that, I think it got them some extra time and some extra attention from the label, from like an investment standpoint and all that for a while.
Why? What's the expectation for a baby band then? Because 4,000, I guess, in this time would still be considered low, but I guess in this case it's still surprising and surprisingly positive. So what would a normal baby band pull?
It depends what it is. And then it's also like, it comes down to like, where do you hit on certain charts? Because that opens up certain doors for you, right? And that helps you get maybe more tours, and it just helps like everybody sell. Like, yeah, I was the sales guy, but everybody was selling something there, right? If you're press, you're selling it to the outlets. If you're sure. touring, you're selling it to the agents, and all of that. So those things were all like really impactful. So if you could say like, hey, it was a top 10 Heatseeker artist or whatever, that's helpful to everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's contextual, is what we're saying.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, so how does your role moving forward? How does your role change? Because obviously, one blind spot for me was how Roadrunner interfaces with the digital era. Now I know there were some things done. There was these From the Vault collections, which I think Monty orchestrated, which was if a band like had more than one record on Roadrunner, they'd have like a bundle of just 2 records in one pack or something like that, presumably to incentivize people discovering the back catalogue and things like that. If I understand rightly, there was also singles put on. This is the problem with this podcast, dude. I've done so fucking many. I couldn't tell you exactly. I forget exactly what I've been told. But
Yeah.
I think there was like, I think Roadrunner trying to lean into online downloading a little bit by releasing singles online first or something like that.
No, we were pretty on it in the sense of like embracing, you know, Apple as it came in and iTunes and all of that. Like, and I would actually say Doug was really instrumental, and Doug Keogh was really instrumental in that because he took it all very seriously, like as like things changed. And obviously he was there for a long time. So I think, you know, he saw different waves of, you know, what technology could do to the industry and what different formats could do to the industry. So I don't think we were never in a sense of like, we're not touching iTunes. Like the money's not there. Like we were never that way. Right. Like, I think it was more of, and again, I think this speaks a little bit more to, you know, the sentiment that like Case as a businessman put into the company was like, everyone's like, there's a lot of money there.
Right.
How do we get it? Like, how do we get our piece of that? Right. Mm-hmm. And metal generally is slower to adopt new formats. Right.
Sure.
So, you know, Nickelback did great there. Mm-hmm. And then you saw things like Slipknot do well there, but it was also an uphill battle. Like, you know, because those accounts, like they were used to whatever the really hot thing was at that moment, like that's what they were focused on. Mm-hmm. And this is the challenge, I think, with, you know, at least the metal side of it always was, you know, banging on the door and beating your way through it, like, and making people pay attention to it because it was meaningful and there was an audience there, and you know, getting folks to like really pay attention and actually see the value there of like, hey, this is an audience you don't have. We can help you get there. And I think we had a lot of success that way, like as it came down. And obviously like they, like as DSPs got bigger and, you know, Apple, you know, got like really good editors and all of that, you know, and then everybody's clamoring to have a relationship with the editor, right? Mm-hmm. And take care of them. You know, you started to kind of see those walls come down a little bit and rely a little bit more on those relationships and those folks to kind of be your voice too. Like, this is meaningful. Like, you guys need to, like, and they would be in the ears of like, you know, people giving real estate, like, you know, on the iTunes store and whatnot, of like, oh yeah, you know, those 9 guys in masks that you all think is scary, like there's actually a massive audience there, like we should give them a break, you know. Like, they deserve that. You know. And that sounds crazy because you think of Slipknot as being like such a big band, but like, you know, sometimes it was a slog no matter what. And again, that's why I say a little bit like being able to amplify that, because you still, as much as they permeated like with like a specific audience, you still, that's not everybody that works in the industry, that's not all the gatekeepers, so you still gotta, like, you know, fight the fight.
There's still people in the world who go, ugh, mask.
Well, and vice versa. As big as Nickelback was, you still sometimes fought with people over like, oh, they're not cool enough. It's like, who are you to judge that, right? Like, look at the numbers and like, give me what we're asking for, because they deserve it.
Yeah.
And same with like, you know, any of the like the baby bands, and like sometimes it was so easy because people like loved it and you had the right gatekeepers and you had those relationships. Sometimes it was a slog, like just trying to get them to understand it. But that was the job and it was great.
That's it, isn't it? That's one of the poignant ones was Mark Emerson talking about the Bloody Kisses. I'm referring to it as a campaign. I don't know if they'd call it a campaign. I think they were just working a record, but getting people to understand this really eclectic group of lads is just like, that's probably a really poignant success story. The fact that Typo had the home it had at Roadrunner, because I don't think anyone else could have delivered on that. And I think that again speaks to the value of how the industry kind of how it mobilizes itself to give those people a platform. And it also speaks to what you were saying earlier, which is it is who you know and it's how you manage those relationships. Because I, Jim Yorkshireman, am not going to convince fucking Johnny record label that 9 Nutters in Mass is a viable commercial prospect, whereas Austin, veteran of the industry, has a much better chance. And therefore, that's where we can influence those numbers coming in.
For sure. And I mean, and again, you hope that you make those relationships, right? And you hope that you get uh we Roadrunner gave me the benefit of being able to have some stuff to put out there and be right?
Yeah.
Just because stuff was already commercially viable, or we had our ducks in a row on things, from like a marketing perspective and a setup perspective, and the label and the artist gave the goods, right? So everybody remembers your big success, and maybe they forget about like the 3 or 4 duds. Like, so you always have that to kind of lean on. And we were relatively, for my duration there, it was pretty consistent that way. Foremost, I mean, there were challenging years here and there. There just weren't like a big Nickelback year or a big Slipknot year, but for the most part, that something fell in that we were able to do a lot with and help with.
I guess here's a question, and maybe this isn't a very good question, but I'm trying to make it as obvious as I can for myself. So we obviously, you're in the world of sales. You have relationships that are propagating these things happening. You have a scene which has historical metrics and SoundScan which you can judge things by. But when you're putting a release out and you're pitching to Best Buy and Target and all these other retailers, and you're trying to get them to sell as much as, or trying to get them to buy as much product as possible, how are you driving return on investment numbers? Because you must be saying, right, okay, yeah, it's not a Slipknot year, it's not a Nickelback year, but it is a fucking Still Remains year. Don't you worry about that target. We think this is going to sell X, and you've got to drive that home. So did you ever have to like predict numbers? Or obviously you had to.
Oh yeah.
What were the mechanics of doing that? And was it, how much of a gamble was it?
Yeah, so we had like budget meetings and projection meetings. So it would usually be me, Cantor, Jonas, Case, Doug. And Case wasn't always there. Case might not have been in those. But we would go through and just like, I mean, it was just this crazy long Excel sheet of everything for the year, stuff that was out, and we were just continuously projecting it to what we had like budgeted for the year, right? There's always a breaking artist category, so that was like units that were reserved for something breaking, right? So
things that have no right making an impact, but we've got to give some sort of resource to it because that's what a record label does.
Well, that was the goal, was to break artists, right? So you had that in there, and if it was if it was Theory of a Dead Man, right? And all of a sudden you have Bad Girlfriend, that starts to eat into that, right? You're like, okay, great, we're breaking an artist. Or if it's Dragon Force with, the YouTube video that it was like as it started, and then Guitar Hero a year later, that eats into it. Or Kill Switch or any of those that, I would say we broke on some level. So that was always there, but was like, as you're doing it, like, it's not something you can just say, we got this, right? Like, this is what we work to. And you're constantly making adjustments. So like once something's out, not, where did it land? And once something's out, then it becomes a little, you have history to look at and all of that. And it becomes a little bit of an easier process to go through. And then you can kind of go through, and then it also kind of comes into play. Like, I mentioned earlier, like, you run deals and stuff like, hey, we're going to be like 1,000 units shy on this one. It's like, hey, let's run a deal on it for, this, so that, we're looking good for the quarter and all of that.
So how do I extrapolate? So there was always I guess you're rolling the dice on your first projection, right? I guess that's what you're doing, because you're making a big bold statement saying this record's going to be the
stuff always carried over, because you're never like just ending a cycle because the year starts over, right? So whatever, like, if you're working a Nickelback record, you're working that for 2 years, right? Or Slipknot record or Kill Switch or any of those. So if those carry over, So you kind of always have something you're working off of, but then you are like kind of planning out. It's like, okay, Gitter's in the studio with Opeth. It should probably be out in July. So you're adding all that stuff in.
You know what? I think I'm thinking of it wrong. I'm thinking of this as a projections per artist. You're thinking projections per quarter, aren't you? You're thinking everything.
Well, I'm thinking of it like, well, this was like the bottom line for the company. Like this was what it was going to be for the year. So it was everything. Everything was on it. It was project by project. So everything had its own line, but it was still project by project. But it was still one summary of everything.
So you always had the room to say, this is underperforming, this is overperforming. Three things are happening over here. This record label just shut down, so we're going to get traffic from that. There's always room to sort of breathe it.
Yeah. And it gave you that full macro view, but also you were drilling into each individual project and like what's overperforming, what's underperforming, what's performing as expected, all of that. So, and then, if something falls out of the sky, like if there's a new signing and the record's done, which would happen on occasion, you drop that in, and then all of a sudden, like you're making up things. And I mean, I think that plays a little bit into some like the heritage signings that like kind of came like in that those later years and
the Loud and Proud stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, and even some of the stuff that like was still coming through A&R. Megadeth was Gitter. That wasn't Loud and Proud. And I mean, Opeth was established at that point. I mean, I think Roadrunner took them to new heights. But there was history there, right? So there were things like that. That's like they didn't start with us.
There's this really cool thing that happens in the mid 2000s. You get a load of European, dyed in the wool European metal, some death metal, some symphonic metal that take one step in Roadrunner. They're all of a sudden a US viable, and then step somewhere else. But they're now a household name in the US. I think that's quite interesting. So I need to look at. But did the opposite happen though? Did you have like a project that was underperforming and you go, look, we're burning 20 grand a month on marketing for this one. Kill it, move that money to Megadeth?
I wouldn't say it was shifted that way. I would say they might kill the budget. They weren't necessarily reassigning it like in the same conversation. That's not to say, hey, this is in the same meeting. They might not. We might move on to another project, and somebody might say, hey, this is overperforming. We have this opportunity to do this, but it's going to cost this much money.
Yeah.
All right, let's bump that up and find it. You always wanted to kind of stay, because I mean, you're doing like the P&Ls and all that stuff. Like you always wanted to stay within your budget on a project either way. So really shifting might come from like, the radio campaign's not really working here, but there's all this heat because of a sync or whatever. Yeah, I'm totally
the MySpace is doing well.
There's something going on here. Let's take the money out of. This is so backwards because it'd probably be the other way. Radio's really heating up, so do we really need all this money for like press or whatever? Like they'd probably just pump it into radio. But so those conversations would happen, right? But it'd be more about like within its own budget. And then if you were tapped, like if you had hit the budget, there was an opportunity to talk about budget increases and stuff like that. It's like, this is overperforming. We should increase this up for this period of time. So those conversations were definitely happening, like within those meetings.
Was Jonas or Doug or Michael Cantor, were they particularly hardline on anything in particular? Were they always reluctant to do certain thing? You know what, mate? It's because I'm a project manager, so I'm like, I want to see this Excel sheet, and I want to see what politics are at play in these meetings because I know what it fucking feels like.
Doug might have been probably I mean, I would actually say both Jonas and Doug were both like very cautious about all of that stuff. I think Doug, you really had Doug was the king of devil's advocate, like. He would throw a positive and a negative at you in the same sentence like no one else could. So, and I really liked Doug, and I liked that about Doug. I feel like I play devil's advocate to too many things now because of Doug, which probably frustrates people. But he, so I think like with him, because sometimes it was me walking into an office and being like, hey, there's this opportunity. and I can get extra visibility at this retailer for this tour that's happening and we're seeing stuff, but like I need this much money, right? Or there's an opportunity at Apple and I need to get the band there, like, you know, but we got to cover it. Like, can I get this budget or whatever? You know, and I think as long as you went in with Doug and you knew Devil's Advocate and you had all your justifications lined up, it was a pretty easy conversation. He just wanted to know that you thought it through and that there was like a method to the madness, right?
That's why he's GM.
Yeah. And then and Jonas was a marketing guy, so he wasn't necessarily like, you know, really tight with the purse, but he was definitely, you know, he it needed to make sense to him in the sense of like, how is this going to increase the exposure? How is this actually going to help amplify the marketing that we're doing in some way? And, you know, there were those projects we worked to where like, you know, they killed the budget and everybody was passionate about it and it would like gut your heart a little bit. I think I was like vocal once in a meeting and I was just like, oh, like when they killed the budget on it and like, and it was done. And he was like, it isn't a comment on the band. Like, I mean, he said that. Like, he was like, we all like the band. We all like the guys. Like,
otherwise they won't be in the room in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So,
what are your memories of Roadrunner United then? Did you think? I mean, not even from just the gig, but from the project as a whole. Did you think, like, no, this is a bit of a weird idea?
No, I thought it was awesome. Like, I mean, I think there was an excitement generally, like within like the core, like. There was the younger team too. Like, did anyone ever mention like the Young Turks meetings to you at all?
Amy did.
Oh, okay.
You must have been a Young
Turk. I haven't gotten
Turk.
to that yet. So you know, we were part of that. We were like part of the younger crew or whatever, and that was very much something Case put together. Right? He wanted the younger team to have a voice. Doesn't mean he couldn't kibosh it, as well as Doug and Jonas as well. Like they could kibosh anything, but like, you know, a lot of crazy ideas came out of that. A lot of really good ideas came out of that. So I think that crew was very into Roadrunner United, and very into the idea of it. And everyone, like, you know, Matt was definitely like a darling of the label, and we all just really liked him and really rooted for him. Adam D was, you know, everybody that got kind of selected as a captain, like, kind of had a special place with, you know, different people in the building. So it was a very unique thing. I mean, for me, it was kind of like, I was like, I mean, Dave Grohl did this already, right? With Probot. But it was on like such a bigger scale than that, because it wasn't just one guy. It really was a collaboration. Like, you think about it now, because there's so many collaborations going on in music. And I feel like, I mean, you think about it in the sense of like, you know, you see it all the time in like pop music and hip hop. But I do think you're starting to see it more in like rock and metal. And you know, so for Roadrunner United to do that, and also some of the people they got, because you knew there was drama with certain artists and stuff like that with the label. Like, you know, so for like Daryl from Glassjaw to be on a song, which I think that's the best song on the record. And
Joey Jordison didn't play drums on it. They're programmed.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But guitar, you know, you take away, you can get from Joey. You know, the fact that they got everybody to like work together and be a part of that was like really special. And the fact that it was like, well, I think I'm fighting like tooth and nail. Like, it's one I bring up all the time, is that it needs a vinyl release. So I'm trying my darndest to get it out on vinyl.
Did you have you seen the concert DVD?
I have. Oh yeah, I was there.
what do you? I'm pretty damn sure that at the start, when I can't remember even who comes out and says, "Hey, let's get the show," I swear, like, the crowd noises are inserted. I swear that, and I know, I'm aware there's a lot of editing, but
it might have been, because it was also our Christmas party, and it was also like a retreat, because like our Christmas parties, they didn't always fly all the international people in, but all the international people were in for this, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, everyone was shit-faced by the time it went on. I barely drink now, but I definitely didn't drink then. So I was sober the whole time, and I mean, I was there with my wife, and I remember, like, you know, everybody, by the time it finally got started, like, everyone was drunk. So like when they went on, it was like a little, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, people were excited. There was noise, but it was also like a bunch of industry people. And I mean, there were tickets sold to fans, but I mean, it was our Christmas party. It was like a lot of industry people, but also you've heard about the Roadrunner Christmas party. It's like, we could have filled that room on our own, like with just our contacts, like easily. Right. So as a big venue, we could have filled that room.
Was there anyone missing from that record? I'm just trying to wrap my brain now. I don't think there's anyone. You could always say there was, but when I think of it, I don't think, did Adam D play on any of them?
What's that? Who?
Adam D didn't play on any of the tracks, did he?
Well, Adam was a team captain.
Adam D wasn't.
It was Matt, Rob, Dino, and Adam.
And Joey.
Oh, and Joey. That's right. No, Adam definitely played on something, I thought.
Oh,
I could be wrong, though. I could be wrong.
I'm trying to just think of who was missing. Not to say, fucking hell, Monty, you didn't organize this properly. But just to demonstrate just how effective it was at showcasing the sheer variety and the footfall on the label. There's not many people I can say were missing other than Adam D.
Huh. That's actually crazy to me that he would be missing. I mean, certainly Killswitch had representation there, but I'm going to chuck that up to Mike Gitter being protective and not wanting to give up any future Killswitch songs. I don't know.
I bet if there was like a producer list, I bet I could find him on there. I bet he's somewhere in there. I'm just not seeing it. No, that's awesome. But yeah, it's one, it needs a vinyl release, and secondly, it needs, I don't know, maybe you kill the concert DVD and you let everyone who's there just remember it as like their own sort of precious thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was a funny night, to say the least.
Oh god, yeah.
The musically, it was great. Like, it was a good time. Like, everyone was tight. You could tell they practiced, with the exception of course, Brian from Shadows Fall, yes. Which everybody knows about that. But and again, just started that bar way too early. But it was, it was a good night. It was a lot of fun, and it was great. I will actually tell you, it's funny going back and thinking about it, of like the level of work it took, especially of like our touring team, to coordinate everything between Harlan Fry and Justin D'Angelo. Like, poor Justin, my God, like that guy was just like, the fact that he didn't become an alcoholic after that is a testament to his spirit. But they ran a tight ship, and they really pulled it off. And that's like, there's a reason a Probot show never happened. That's a lot. It's a lot of personalities, a lot of people to coordinate with and get it all together. And man, they did a great job.
Yeah,
and the artists too. Like, they took it all really seriously. And the one thing that is not overdubbed is the "fuck Monty" chants that Joey started there, and and again, a testament to him. So,
so I want to make a move towards sort of like the end era of the sort of what we'll call like the independent era, or whatever you want to call it. But I want to let's just do a lightning round.
Okay.
So we had the Young Turks. Was there a name for the old guard?
As far as like just the folks that predated us,
because I'm sure that there was a senior leadership meeting which wouldn't involve any Young Turks. And if we're going to be as poetic as to call the young people the Young Turks, you should be calling that one the corresponding oppressing regime what the Young Turks are rebelling against. It'd only be sporting to do so.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the A&R team might tell you that. No, for us, like, no, that was like our voice, and that was something like they had coined.
That's so funny that.
And I'm not sure who coined it, but there was no like special term for like, everyone else. It was strictly like kind of that the Young Turks, like, the new blood in the company, and bring them and like I guess had it gone on, it would have been funny to see if people aged out of the Young Turks, like if he got kicked out at some point.
Lightning round number 2. So this is something which is buried. It's buried somewhere in my psyche. I read it somewhere maybe a year ago, and it came up when I was speaking to Dave Longcow. When we had this period of like the AAA artists, and we had this underground metal part as well, there was apparently, and it's been refuted by a number of people, but there was apparently talks of splitting the label in two and having Roadrunner Red and Roadrunner Blue. Does that sound remotely familiar?
Yeah. Never heard anything about that.
Fine. That's another point to the it never happened crowd.
Yeah. I mean, there were certainly like those folks that were very like, the brand is the brand, right? Yes. And then there were folks that were definitely more open, and there were hires like to help with the stuff that was a little more eclectic. And we had some success with the more eclectic stuff too.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, take Nickelback out of it, right? I think Case's next goal was to break a big alternative act, and that's what he really wanted to happen. And had some success with the Dresden Dolls. They definitely didn't fit the mold, right? And then had some success with Young the Giant, and I think they were probably the most successful from the alternative side, and with alternative radio, with this like the syncs and stuff that they were getting. I always joke around because as they were like chipping away and getting more and more accolades, I was like back then the big thing was like, if you can get a sync on Glee, look what it did for Journey, and like that was like the big thing, like get a sync on Glee, it'll really help, and because that broke a few bands. Really? And we did finally get that. Like at some point, that was always my challenge. I was like into marketing. I was like, give me a sync on Glee. I'll get more records out there.
So you eventually got a song on Glee.
Yeah. And it certainly, I think at that point, like, I think they were maybe on like their third season. So it wasn't quite the juggernaut, but I mean, it definitely moved units. It's like, I mean,
what was
how
the
you
song?
look at, that was Cough Syrup. I believe, yeah, it was Cough Syrup.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, which was kind of the song we always thought would be the big song from them. Yeah. So that was great, and it's evolving things, right? Like because now it's like TikTok, right? Can you get that? Can you get that viral thing happening on TikTok? And it's like, which is always funny, because you can't make something viral happen; it just happens. But yeah, so it's like, and I see that now, it's all cyclical, right? Like, because that was the big thing then, and now it's TikTok, and before that, and radio was always like a big factor. Like, now everyone wants to be on playlists, and that's the new radio, right?
I can't keep up, mate.
You really can't. It's crazy.
Just play 20-year-old video games and sit down.
Well, and video games too. Like, I mean, that's still a very viable thing if it's the right thing.
Yeah, get your song on the next COD advert, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Totally. So let's look towards the latter days then. The latter days of the independent, or fully independent, if you want to call it. I haven't got a name for this yet. I think I might have come up with a name for it, of this era. Because the label's still going and it's still strong. But let's figure this out. So have I missed any milestones up to this point? Let's call it sort of 2010, because I think this will be the time you'll be realizing something's amiss, right? Some things are different around 2010.
Oh, for sure. Or not so much amiss, but just like, the starting to notice just like some of the, I'm in those budget meetings, not hitting those numbers, and whatnot, and the realities of what that can mean.
Have I missed anything up to that point? Any milestone? Any stories that you've got? Because we had the All Hope Is Gone one. Don't want to miss anything else.
I think. There's obviously like the success stories, that were on brand, right? Like Kill Switch and what that meant to the label, and the consistency there, and just you might have seen this on social media, but I saw Mike D posted the other day that the album, he heard a rumor that the album As Daylight Dies was certified platinum.
Yep.
And then like it got announced over the weekend. So That was really exciting to see. Like, I was there for like, the trudge to gold on those things. And I, even had like a nice correspondence with Vaughn on the management team, congratulating that crew and whatnot. So, there were all those things that were like kind of near and dear to our hearts, from the label, and all those, those bands that, they, actually, I will tell you a funny story, of the earlier days. This was before I moved to New York.
Okay.
Machine Head. So Through the Ashes of Empires did not come out in the United States.
Yep.
Only came out in the UK. And I listened to that record. I liked Machine Head. Supercharger was, a miss, but it was, something, every band should be allowed a miss, right? And I think like maybe some folks just didn't quite feel like they needed, as good as Through the Ashes of Empire is, my favorite Machine Head record. I would say when I listened to that, I immediately called New York. I did not even know Monty yet. I called Mark Shapiro and I was like, yo, I just listened to the Machine Head you sent me. He's like, yeah. I was like, why are we not putting this out here? He's like, right, it's really good. I was like, what the fuck are they thinking? Like, what is Monty thinking? And never having met the dude. And again, I just think it was like, again, you can get really beat down in those like A&R meetings or whatever. So maybe it was that, I don't know. But I was very proud of the day. I think maybe it was like 6 months later where we licensed the record so we could put it out in the US and gave it a shot. And then obviously like they had a whole second wind, right after that with the blackening and all that. So, but I always thought that was crazy. Like, I know you love like the business nerdiness side of it. So I was always like, I thought that was an interesting one, just in the sense of like, that record did not follow the norm at all.
Yeah.
But it was interesting in the sense of like, no one gave up on the band though either. Yeah. And there is something to that. Like, I think those are legacy bands, like those that really started from ground zero and worked their way into something. Like there was a lot of respect in the building for those artists. And, even like the old stuff, as much as, I've heard some of the older artists that were there long before I was part of Roadrunner, tell their stories and whatnot. Like, I'd love them to be a fly on the wall in like some of the meetings I sat in where like Doug Keogh was always the champion of catalog and like how passionate he would be about like our reissue series and like the Vault series and like, and all of that. So, there was a lot of love there. That I think would probably maybe surprise some of them.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially, I think now these days, there's an elevation in the standard of conversation in general. And I think when it comes to things like Roadrunner, it was just a product which always ended up on Blabbermouth as this happened, this controversy, that controversy. I think people are now sort of realizing, oh no, there's another side to it as well. And everything's mostly amicable.
Oh yeah, totally.
And respectful. Okay, so you're in the budget meetings. It's 2010. The numbers aren't quite looking as strong as they once were. How are we rolling down the hill?
It was a few different things. I think there was a little bit of a struggle to break artists, right? Like some newer artists. Theory was a success story, and it was around that time too, I feel like. So I feel like that rejuvenated some of it a bit. They had done the Loud and Proud deal. That was, I don't want to be too harsh on the Loud and Proud team because and the man behind that, because he definitely was very good at finding that repertoire and like working those artists and had great relationships.
I'll preface it by recommending Hand Cool Teddy Bear.
It's
a great album.
But some of those, the way it was always kind of pitched to us is like, this is established repertoire, established sales, low maintenance. and that's just not reality, because these are established artists. Like they were not low maintenance, and rightfully so. They were like, a lot of them were icons in their own regard, right? So some of them were really good deals, and they were really, profitable for us and whatnot. And some of them were really not. I think my favorite one was actually the Rat record, and this is a testament to Dave Rath, because that dude, he was in like a hair metal band, back in the day, Heaven's Edge, and he was championing this thing, and I think everyone, us younger guys and ladies, I think were kind of writing it off a little bit as like, it's a little hair metal, and he did such a good job selling us on it. Well, one, they made a great record, and he did such a good job selling us on it, and there weren't like crazy expectations with it either. We far exceeded that one, and that one was a great deal for us. But I was also always kind of like forever endeared to them, just because I was like, man, you did such a good job selling us to like the staff, and like that was one where the A&R guy did such a good job like endearing himself. He got like a lot of folks, myself included, like Amy, a whole bunch of folks over there, like to really just kind of like fall in love with the band and really champion them, like in the later era for them. So that was one that like really, and there were a few of those.
Who
that, like,
was the one that orchestrated Loud and Proud? Was that Wrath?
No, that Tom Lipsky was the man behind Loud and Proud. Like as far as like bringing in the deals and all of that. And he had like a similar business model over Sanctuary. Like, he was just definitely like ingrained in the scene with like these heritage artists. He knew everybody. And he was a great like A&R source from that side, but he was really more doing the business. Like once it came over, typically it was getting assigned to different A&R people. So like Wrath got that one, right?
So you were saying, I just wanted to...
Oh, yeah. So, like, that Monty did some of them. Like, I mean, they all just kind of got divvied out to different folks on the team.
All right. Okay. And so when's the axe fallen then in 2012? How's that feeling? How's that feeling to you? And what's the run up for you?
I mean, for me, it was like, I was in those meetings, so I knew what the numbers were, and it was... I think there was always the hope that there would be a Slipknot record that year and all that, and it just kept bumping and bumping and bumping, and we just didn't have anything. So it was just kind of like the nerve-wracking thing of like, it really wasn't a strong year for the label. Again, you had people from the sister label like in the building, in there too, and so you just felt like it was a little more hands-on. Like, Case had kind of said what he was going to say, like in the sense of like, this is the deal. And like, I can't remember the exact timeline on it, but I remember, he gave a speech basically that, he was being bought out and basically he was gone. And he
literally summoned you all around and said, this is happening.
Yeah, like, he wanted everybody to feel good about the situation, and he took care of, a lot of the folks that had been with him a long time. Like he was nothing if not like incredibly loyal to, his core staff. And he was, he was just a really genuine person from that. He was very business savvy. He could be very, abrupt and curt and all of that too. But he definitely took care of his people. But yeah, like, he told the story about like, when I was, when I worked for a major, and then I got like fired and, now I'm here and they bought me out and now I'm fired again. No, like he kind of said it like a joke. It was hilarious. Like in retrospect, it was a little heartbreaking at the time. But yeah, so it was very much like, you just kind of got a sense of that. And then kind of from there, everybody kind of started to like, to kind of move on. Like, I think when I had found out I was being let go, I had just gotten back from like Dark Horse had come out. from Nickelback, I had just gone out to Columbus, Ohio for some big arena show, and like Walmart was filming it for like some promotion that they had. And I was out there for that. And then I kind of came back and like, I mean, I got the news like shortly thereafter, but like, even at that point, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't sleeping well. Like, I mean, you just got like, it was like nerve wracking just knowing the numbers, right? Like knowing what, like having that much like insight into it, right? And at this point, I was like the head of sales. Like they let my boss go. They let Michael Canner go like a year earlier, and that was like that was heartbreaking. That was like the worst thing I ever had. That was the most awkward like month of my life. Was, you know, him kind of working out like the rest of that time and knowing I'm staying and he was leaving, and him being like a mentor to me and all of that, like, and just an all around good dude. You know, you don't want to see that like with anybody. And so I got called into Jonas's office and he gave me the news and he was very kind about it and everything. And, you know, I got a sense that he wasn't like super stoked about it either. And, you know, met with the HR people and they were nice too, you know, like nobody was, you know, nasty about any of this stuff. It was always like, you know, it's just you doing your job. I'm not lying. I walked back to my desk. Justin D'Angelo looked at me square in the eyes because everybody knew something was up that day. And I just popped in Nickelback's "If Today Was Your Last Day." And everyone just started laughing. Like, because it's like, what are you going to do? And I had my first good night's sleep in a long time that night. I just needed the closure. I needed to know what was going on. But, you know, in like hindsight, like, you know, in this industry, it's all how much you are, how kind you can be to, you know, your partners in this, whether that's the artist, whether that's, you know, your partners in sales or what have you. So I had a lot of people come out to support me. When I've been through this long enough now, when other people go through it, I try to be that person. Like I want to reach out to them. I want to be helpful to them. Because you just never know, like when something like that's going to happen, and it happens a lot. And I ended up back with Warner like 2 weeks after my last day at Roadrunner. So, you know, and there is something to be said for that too, because there's a lot of us that have that story that got brought over because they saw a lot of value and that is something about Roadrunner, like the things that they did. And a lot of it was throwing us to the wolves and letting us figure it out. But they always kind of gave us like the opportunity to figure it out and to kind of stumble and guide us a little bit. So there are so many of us that have gone on to do like great things in the industry or outside of the industry. And, you know, I'll tell you, when I had started at Warner in the capacity that I'm in now, I don't think it was the president at the time. It was the next one that came in. He pulled me aside and was just like, and he had brought in a couple other people from old Roadrunner. So like, there was a whole group of us at Warner that was like, the old guard, the new old guard, those last few years, right? Yeah. And they were just like, we know Case brought in good people, and we know like Jonas brought in good people, and you know they always were like, Roadrunner people like know their shit, and that was something that they were very like adamant about. Like, you know, they knew the talent that was there, so if they could figure out a way to bring people over and redistribute that talent, they absolutely did.
What's your role with Warner now then?
I'm doing so I manage all of our Spotify business, actually. So I'm on the digital streaming side. Yeah. Wow. For the US. I do all of our Spotify business. And then I also do like some stuff with like our international repertoire, making sure it like gets released in the US.
Is it just certain brands under Warner? Or is it?
No, it's everything. It's Warner, ADA. It is everything.
Fuck. So, I feel like I've taken like tens of thousands of dollars worth of Warner time.
No, I picked this day for a reason. It tends to be a little quieter. No, it's.
Don't let them find that out.
No, yeah. But yeah, like again, like so many of us, like Rich Perkins, and I know he's been brought up a few times. He's over there. Dan Goldberg was over there till recently. There's still a few folks over at Roadrunner, like from the marketing side, and one tried and true from the radio promo side, Phil Queso, and Chris Brown and Susie on the marketing side. So yeah, I mean, there's still some good folks over there. And then a whole bunch just in the Warner ecosystem too.
Do you think there was anyone who was relieved at what happened in 2012?
I might have been the only one that was like, got a better night's sleep that night. I wouldn't want to speak for somebody else. I can only speak for myself. And I was a little bit, just because I knew something was up. And I mean, I was certainly like, oh shit, like this has been my career. This is the only real job. I mean, I had part-time jobs and, all that, but like, this was my first real job. So, when that ended, I was definitely, there was that nervousness, but then I also kind of realized, because of the flood of folks like reaching out to me and, the opportunities I had within like 2 weeks, like of, being able to do interviews and all of that, like I was like, okay, I think I'll be okay, and this is all right. So I was like, I will say, I felt like I was a little lucky getting out in that first wave, because it was like, the first bigger wave of it, just because I had that opportunity to kind of be out there and be looking and all of that too.
It's a good perspective though, because a lot of the time, especially because I'm only scoping myself from 80 through to 2012, because I'm like, that's sort of the period most people are probably familiar with, and I don't want to get sued. So just keep it to that lot. But in doing so, it kind of sometimes, and I've said this before, especially about Leo, there's almost like passive antagonists where there's just such an established narrative of like corporations eating other corporations. Everyone looks like the bad guy. It's like, oh, it's not really the case.
Not at all.
So it's good for you to sort of expound on that point a little bit, And
Leo are so funny because we continue to work together, because he was like one of the founders for 300, which is, another upstart label that he did. And before he left that, but, so I was in this role, he would invite people over to his place to like introduce, artists, and like have the DSPs over for like, scones and croissants and all that. And it was funny because like, I mean, he was always like super gracious. But it is funny, like if he found out you were from Roadrunner, it was like you automatically like he was like, okay, you're okay. You know what you're doing. So like, there was always that element of things with him. So I felt like there was always a lot of respect from him for Roadrunner and the brand and all of that.
Yeah. Well, dude, I think I'm done in terms of questions. Is there anything I've missed off?
Unless you wanted to do any of the best and worst day stuff, or any of that stuff.
We should do that, shouldn't we? I didn't run out.
I do have one case story too, if you want it.
Let's do best and worst day and the case story.
All right, so best day. I already told you Slipknot number one, but so I'll tell you this one because it just made me laugh. And it's actually also a case story, but not the one I was going to tell you. So the first Roadrunner retreat. So again, very green. I think had been there full time for 1 week before going up to this thing with the entire company. And everyone was telling me about how there would be this group activity and how competitive Case is. The group activity was paintball. And I was just like, okay, I've never done paintball before. This will be fun, right? And so we get in there, we're going like, everybody's like super gung ho, everybody's being like uber competitive, like, and everybody's trying to shoot everybody. And I was just kind of like hunkered down, like behind something. And finally, like somebody like poked up, so I just started like letting loose. And then finally, like, I think I got hit. So I stopped and everybody was running at me. And I was like, why is everybody running at me? And they were like, stop. I was like, what? And then they're like, dude, not cool. And I was like, what? And they picked Case up, and he's just covered in paint, like his whole chest is just covered in paint. And apparently I was just like unloading on him the whole time. And everyone was like, dude, no. And I was like, what? And then he looks over at everybody and he was like, what's the problem? Like, this is the game. He's like, I'm not gonna brutalize a Dutch accent, but it was very, very funny in the Dutch accent. Like, what's the big deal? I mean, legitimately, like he had the goggles on, and it was like all like even goggles and stuff. It was, So I was just like, oh my god, I'm gonna get fired tomorrow. But it was totally fine.
Didn't care.
That was a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, the Slipknot #1 is probably also one like highly up there. But that was like one of the ones where I kind of felt like these are good people. Like I ended up in a good spot. if this is what we get to do as a group. So that was a fun one. And then also I would say Times of Grace. I took them for with Kathy Merritt. We took them to iTunes to perform for them, do like a little introduce the record, and they played a couple songs acoustic or whatever.
Yeah.
And Adam D was very into really spicy foods. He probably still is. And he was very into a show called Man vs. Food, which, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So he was very into the food challenges, and he found out that there was this wing spot that was on the show, and he wanted to go there and try the wings. So we roll in there. It's me, him, Jesse, and Kathy, and we proceed to get these wings. You have to sign a waiver, right? They caked this sauce. You couldn't even see the wings, and it was just like mud. I mean, it looked like mud on these wings, right? And we go in there, and so me and Adam are both looking at each other, in the eyes, getting ready to start. And then I think Kathy was watching it, and she goes, "Go!" And I just start piling. I get one done. I'm starting the second. I look up at Adam, and he's eating the first one really slowly. And then he just goes, "I'm out." And I proceeded to finish the second one. And then I'm like, I am out. I ran to the soda machine, chugged so much soda, which does nothing for you. You need milk, right? For that. And I mean, I drank so much. I will not tell you what happened in that bathroom half an hour later. But I just loved that I had that experience with Adam. So that was a fun, as much as throwing up was not fun later, that was a good day. That was a lot of fun with those guys.
I think I've never got with those places, man. It was especially Man vs. Food, they'll go out back. It's this is Tommy fucking, he's the head chef here. And Tom, what's the secret? And he goes, we never quash the fucking grill. It's the Tennessee way. It's the Tennessee way. Fuck off, you're just lazy. Wash the fucking grill, you bastard.
You good. And worst day, I would say definitely towards the end, just because of the stress levels. I would actually say I think I took a vacation day, and they threw a budget meeting on the schedule. And what they were doing is they kept moving records that were never going to come. And I was the person in the meeting that was we just need to rip the Band-Aid. Just take it off. We're not fooling anybody, right?
Yeah.
So I was furious, and it was a situation I couldn't even join. It's not today where you could just call in for it or whatever, mm-hmm. Right? So I remember I called our head of finance, and I was just you make sure you talk about this. You make sure you talk about this. This has to move. These numbers have to be here. And he's like, oh, okay. And when I finally got to a place where I could call him, I called him, and I was like, how'd it go? And he was like, oh, they changed everything. They totally, yeah, I'm sorry. And I feel maybe from that point to the end was where I was definitely just stressed all the time. But yeah, so that was not fun. That was definitely a point where I just felt I didn't have a voice. So that wasn't fun.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, but beyond that, it was so many good memories there. And
yeah. I should probably rephrase that question. Just start with the worst, then the best, and then you end.
Yeah. You can flip flop them, right?
Yeah. I can do that.
And then and then I'll tell you my one case story too.
The paintball one wasn't the case one.
No. Actually, so at some point in the letter, and it was probably the best decision I ever made because maybe it bought me an extra year there. Our head of international, or the U.S. international lead, was, I think, let go at the time, and she had been there a long time. And I had decided, I'd been doing this a long time. Cantor had been the head of sales forever. That was my next logical step, but at the same time, he wasn't going anywhere, right? Yeah. So I kind of put it out there, I should put in for this. So I had talked to the office manager, Kish, about getting time with Case and Jonas. And it's I want to talk about this job. And he's like, okay, I'll get you time with them. And so Case came in, and, I sat down with them, and it was really the first time I had talked to Case about something like that, about career aspirations or whatever and all that. And I will tell you, told him I want to be considered for this. And he kind of looked around and then looked at me, and he was just like, why would you want to do that? He's like, I did international. You know what you get to do with international? You get to do international. That's all you ever get to do. And he was like, you're in sales. You get to do everything. You touch everything. Why would you give that up? He's like, I understand you want to grow. And I know that. And I'm paraphrasing, and he didn't say it exactly like that. But the way I took it was, he was very much like, it's good to know where your aspirations are, because that's going to be in the back of my mind now. Right. He was like, I'm not going to let you pigeonhole yourself. from his perspective, right?
Sure.
And, so I thought that was really, I definitely left that I'm like, well, I certainly don't feel like I wasn't heard, and I don't feel like I'm missing something now if I don't get this, right? I think he wanted somebody with a very specific skill set for that, and he had something else in mind for me. And flash forward a year, that was the evolution. They had me come in and take that over as they started to consolidate things. So I was definitely after the fact, I was like, glad I had that meeting. But it was kind of my first, I had lots of interactions with Case when he was in New York, but always just kind of more friendly, shooting the shit kind of stuff. In the meetings, talking about, budgets and numbers and all of that. So it was nice to actually have that opportunity with him. And I felt like that's been shared a lot through your podcast too.
It is a story of leadership, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, for sure. And everybody, I would say as a US employee, between the three folks, between Case, Jonas, and Doug, very different styles between all of them. And I think it actually complemented the staff in a lot of ways. You certainly had you on your toes all the time because there's three very unique personalities. But a lot to learn from them.
Interesting.